It is so easy as married couples to stop dating. We want to encourage you to keep dating, and not only that, but to date with a purpose. And maybe you haven't invested in your marriage for a while. This is going to be a great evening, not only having fun, but actually spurring on your marriage and thinking about your marriage, talking about your marriage, and it's going to be a great time. So you can get tickets at the Welcome Center or online. There's a chance that things will sell out, so we want to encourage you to get those tickets quickly. It's this Friday. Also, the second email I received was from Eswatini. A year ago, we raised the funds to build the Bobacaz Church, which is right now just a little shack, a tin and wood shack. They've had this church for a long time, but the chief just gave the permission for the church to receive the land, which means we have a team going there already in April of 16 people. I'll be leading a construction team, and if you would be interested in being on that construction team, I don't have all the details yet, but email me, church@riverwood.cc, and we will fire you off any information that comes in with regards to times and costs and flights and things like that. Possibly you even want to come as a couple, and one of you wants to work with the kids and the other on construction. We're going to get this church built, and we're very excited about that. Well, let's shift gears, and I want you to come with me to Paris. So, Paris 1925. Paris was a city of energy and passion, and it had a problem. And the problem was called the Eiffel Tower. The reason it was a problem is that public opinion had changed against this tower. One novelist called it a truly tragic street lamp. Another called it a skinny pyramid of iron ladders. And another called it that useless and monstrous tower, irreparably ugly, and the dishonor of Paris. So public opinion had turned against the tower, but also it had another problem: maintenance. By 1925, it had already been painted 6 times, and it took 3 years and 60 tons of paint each time to paint it. And so it was rusting, it was costing way too much, and so even the newspapers were coming out and saying, hey, this thing was supposed to be dismantled 20 years earlier. Why is it still here? It's ugly. Let's get rid of it. So it only made sense when all of the high-ranking business owners of scrap steel yards were all called together into a luxurious hotel suite overlooking the city, and a man walked in from the government, introducing himself as the deputy general of Post and Telegraph, and in a hushed tone, he began to talk to these executives. And he said, look it. Public opinion has turned. Maintenance is costing way too much. This thing was supposed to be torn down. For political reasons I can't even share with you, the government has decided that we are going to be dismantling the Eiffel Tower, and I've called you here because I want you to bid on the project. Well, these guys got so excited because this was going to be a deal of a lifetime. And so they all put their bids in, and it was told that one of you was going to win this bid, and it would be announced the next day. So the deputy general the next day took one of the men, Andre Poisson, aside. He was a scrap steel dealer. He took him aside and he confided in him. He said, listen, Mr. Poisson, you did not win the bid, but I can make it so you did. All I need is a $100,000 bribe, and I can make it so that you win this bid. And you end up with the 14.5 million pounds of steel. Well, Andre Poisson knew the French government at the time and thought, this seems to be exactly in line with how they operate. So he slipped this deputy general, the $100,000. The guy's name was Victor Lustig, posing as the director general, one of history's most notorious swindlers. This man had 45 different identities, and he had just pulled off the biggest scam of all time, selling the Eiffel Tower. And he took off with the $100,000. If you think that's crazy, a month later, he did it again. He sold the Eiffel Tower a second time to some very gullible people and ended up walking away with a whole pile of money. Now, you might be sitting there going, how could this even be possible? How could these high-ranking business leaders who are smart and skilled, experienced, and successful, how could they believe such an audacious lie? Well, they were taken for a ride because Victor wasn't just really good at lying, he was fantastic at making the lie look like the truth. He was smooth, he was confident, he spoke with such authority, and in a gentle voice, he whispered secrets of the inside that other people wouldn't know about. And he gained their confidence and their trust, and he was very believable. Most of us, the reason I'm telling you this story is because most of us have a con man or a con woman in our heads. And that con man or that con woman tell us grandiose lies and try to get us to buy the equivalent of the Eiffel Tower, and we buy it all the time. We believe these crazy lies. And today we're going to name this voice in our heads as self-doubt. Self-doubt doesn't come stumbling in all obvious and clumsy. No, self-doubt is clever. Self-doubt is slick. Self-doubt can sell you anything. And it's very, very persuasive because it says, hey, I've got inside information that you don't know anything about. And what I'm telling you is true. You can trust me. And it goes on to say things like this: you're not good enough. And it makes you feel like that is a fact. It will say, you'll never change. You've tried to change, but you'll never change. And it says it in such a way that we believe it. Self-doubt is so slick, it insists that everybody else has got life figured out, but you don't, and you're the idiot. If you do have a measure of success, self-doubt will tell you that you're not that good and that you are an imposter and that people are going to one day see through you for who you really are. It says, don't bother trying because you're just going to end up failing. Nobody really likes you. You don't deserve to dream and have such dreams, and you're falling behind. Everybody else is way further ahead than you. You're never going to catch up. And besides that, let me just let you in on a little insider. God is disappointed with you. And we believe it. So I recently went to work, and I had a question of the Bible. I wondered, are there any people in the Bible who struggled with self-doubt? I came out with 16 names. And this began my study of 16 people, and I wanted to find out, was there anything common about their experience that we could learn from? And what I discovered, and I want to share today, are 7 key factors that drive their self-doubt and drive our self-doubt. Now, before we get into this, let me say this. Every person in the Bible that I studied must have been talking to themselves. There was a voice going on in their head, and they were talking to themselves. And you see, that's where self-doubt starts. It starts as a conversation that happens inside of your own head. You know what I'm talking about. So let's just ask this question for a moment. What is that voice? Where does that voice come from? How do we identify what that voice is that we hear every single day? Well, you could call that voice your inner critic, your subconscious, your mental narrator. You could call it the chatterbox in your head. You could call it the second guesser. Biblically, we have some names for this voice. We call it the flesh, the accuser's whisper, the voice of the old self, and, of course, the voice of the enemy. Call it whatever you want. It is going to try to make you believe that what it's saying is truth. It's going to try and sell you the Eiffel Tower. It is a liar, it is a swindler, it is smooth, and it promises to have authority with inside information. But today what we want to do is we want to expose the language of self-doubt. And I don't doubt that you will actually identify and recognize a number of these phrases because you've heard them. And number one, as I was studying the scriptures and these Bible people, they said to themselves, I can't. But we find in scripture that God said, I called you. You see, when you struggle with self-doubt, we experience feelings of inadequacy, like we aren't qualified, like we are unworthy. And I want to show you some examples of this. Moses was called on a mission by God, and this is what Moses said. He says, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you spoke to me, I get tongue-tied, and my words get tangled up. Classic self-doubt. I can't do this, God. You called me to do this, but I can't do this. I'm not skilled to do this. Gideon is called on a mission by God. And Gideon says this, how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in all the tribes of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family. I can't do this. I don't have what it takes. God called Jeremiah on a mission. And Jeremiah says this, I don't know how to speak well enough for that, for I am too young. I don't have enough experience. I couldn't do this. Saul was called on a mission by God, and this is what he said. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin, the smallest in Israel, and my family is the least important of all the families in the tribe. You must have the wrong man. I can't do this. I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm not smart enough, I don't have what it takes. When someone says, I can't, it rarely is an indication of their skills or their ability, and much more about their view of their own identity. When somebody says, I can't, it probably is more rooted, not in their skill set, but more in their fears, in their fear, in their identity, and their desire to protect themselves. However, I love what the Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh said. Listen to this, I love this. If you hear a voice within you say, you can't paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. Great advice. Because everybody hears the voice say, you can't or I can't. And Vincent van Gogh says, if you hear the voice say you can't, then don't believe it. In fact, here's some advice for you. We need to begin to doubt. We need to begin to doubt and actually act on what it says we can't do, rather than doubting God's call in your life. Here's a truism, I believe, that when you doubt, you move ahead in your life, and you begin to challenge the lies that are coming at you. The voice of the swindler will always invite you to a hotel room, a fancy hotel room in your mind, and try to sell you the Eiffel Tower, but don't believe it for a minute. Begin to doubt. Here's the second thing that they said. They said, I'm too weak. But God said in these same passages, I'm your strength. But they protested, I'm too weak. Abram's wife Sarah claimed that she was too old. Zechariah claimed that he was too old. Timothy claimed that he was too young. The Israelites standing on the border of the promised land after coming back from a scouting mission, listen to what they said. They said, and we even saw giants there. We felt as small as grasshoppers. And that is how we must have looked to them. Classic self-doubt. Classic, I'm too weak. I don't have what it takes. You see, self-doubt is obsessed with your flaws. Self-doubt is fixated on your weaknesses and your limitations and your past and your problems and your flaws. In fact, it has a huge photo album, and it loves to bring the photo album out every day. See, you failed here. You aren't very good at this. You have limitations here. You're no good at that. Therefore, you are weak. It's a con man, and it loves to exaggerate and swindle you into believing that you are your limitations and your faults. There's no lie that is more powerful than a lie that is partially true. So is it true that you are weak? Yes. Is it true you have limitations? Yes. Is it true that you have a past? Yes. Is it true that you've made mistakes? Yes. Is it true that you have problems in your life? Yes. But self-doubt will only fixate on that, and it fails to make room for what God wants to do in the midst of all that. You see, God says to you, yes, you are weak. Yes, you do have limitations. Yes, you got a past and you got problems. Yes, that's all true. But I am your strength. You got to factor that in. That's the game changer. I will be with you. I will walk with you. I will be your strength. Number 3, they said, I'm inferior to others. But God said, you are chosen. Many biblical figures felt inferior, and I love the story of Saul. Israel did not have a king. They hadn't had a king yet. They desperately begged God for a king, and God said, okay, I'm going to give you a king. I'm going to choose Saul. Now, Saul, the Bible says, was large in stature. Physically, he was a commanding presence. Now, he was young, he was energized, he had leadership potential. He came from a great family, he had a great family legacy. The people loved him, the priests loved him, everything was going for him. And so when they went to find him, to anoint him as king, do you know where they found him? Hiding in the baggage. Here's this big guy that's strong and got all this going for him, and he's hiding in the baggage. Because self-doubt had got into his head and said, I'm inferior compared to other people. Self-doubt was telling him that he was no good, that there were others who could do a better job than him. Self-doubt loves to highlight comparisons to other people, and it will make you feel inadequate every time. It will say, look, you are not talented, you don't have what it takes, other people are far more qualified, and this leads to such insecurity. Believe me, I know, because I've struggled with this my entire life. And I want to let you know that the new best friend of self-doubt is right here. Breaking out in the last 15 to 20 years, social media. Social media is the new best friend and tool of self-doubt, because every single day you carry a little device around with you that is screaming to you that you aren't pretty enough, that you aren't as strong, that you aren't as funny, that you aren't as smart, that you aren't as witty, creative, talented, clever, artistic, popular, or attractive, or followed as all these other people. And what it ends up doing, self-doubt loves to do this, it locks you in handcuffs of comparison and it paralyzes you. Because self-doubt's aim is to cause you not to take that big step, that next step. It wants you to get small and hide in the baggage. Self-doubt loves to paralyze you and keep you from the call that God has in your life. You will never break the stronghold of self-doubt until you figure out how to break this whole habit of comparing yourself to others. And so I have a great little motto for you that you can take away on this one, and it's this: their business is none of your business. Their business is none of your business. Instead, focus on your mission and being all that God has called you to be. Their business is none of your business. Stop comparing yourself to them. Just simply focus on the calling that God has in your life and do the very best with what God has given you and who you are. Are any of these phrases beginning to sound familiar? Well, they are. I know they are, because we all hear them. I hear them all the time. These are the same old, tired phrases that have been bouncing around in people's heads for at least the last 3,000 years. There's no new tricks here. The swindler loves nothing more than to sell us these lies. Number 4. They said, I'm afraid. Whereas you know that God said many times, do not fear. Moses feared being rejected if he stepped out to lead. Gideon feared not being strong enough to lead. Elijah feared Jezebel was going to come after him and kill him. David feared Saul was going to come after him and kill him. Job feared that he was going to experience more suffering. Jonah feared that the people weren't going to listen to his message. Moses feared that he wasn't going to have what it takes to confront Pharaoh. I mean, on and on and on. The list goes on and on of all these people who had these fears and these worries of what was going to happen. Fears of what might happen, as Pastor John called it a couple of weeks ago, catastrophizing, is just a classic move of self-doubt to cause you to, it's a breeder of self-doubt, to cause you to become paralyzed. Pastor John talked about a Penn State study, and I think there's a few of them out there, and some of them have close but maybe a little bit different statistical numbers. The one that I came across said that they did a study of the worries, and I think John's numbers were a little different in his study, but they're close. I think John said that 92% of the worries didn't come true. The study I saw said 85% of the person's worries did not come true. It left 15% that did come true, but then they realized that out of the 15%, 79% of those weren't as bad as the people thought, which means that only 3% of how we worry and what we fear actually ever comes true the way we think it's going to. 97% of our worries are just lies. And yet they have the power. That little 3% has the power to stop us in our tracks and to paralyze us. Well, we haven't quite exhausted the phrases that the people in the Bible used and said. And here's the next one, number 5. They said, I need proof. Whereas God said, trust me. I found this very interesting, that the Bible people would often come to a place of crisis of faith. And they turned to this phrase that said, I need proof. Gideon couldn't believe that God was calling him, so he said, hey, prove it with this fleece. And then he asked God to prove it again. Hezekiah couldn't believe the healing that was coming his way, so he asked God to prove it. Zechariah had a crisis of faith and didn't believe the angel's message. And then, of course, there's this guy named Doubting Thomas, who said, I will not believe unless I see proof. We're living in very unique times where, like no other time in our lifetime, at least in my lifetime, have we experienced such a continent-wide crisis of faith. And most of it being spurred on by COVID-19. Churches have declined, faith has declined, people have been questioning their faith and dismantling their faith and deconstructing their faith and saying, I need proof. I need proof that God is real. I need proof that God really, his promises are going to come true. Fewer people are boldly following God and boldly stepping forward in confidence, and more are saying, I'm not so sure if I believe this anymore. But even this whole idea of I need proof and questioning our faith is nothing new. It's a tired and worn line of the swindler who loves nothing more than to take the news of the day and to exaggerate it and to cause it to have a new wave of dismantling our faith. Now, let me spotlight just kind of two more real quick. Number 6, I'm not ready. But God says in Scripture, I'll equip you. I know you're not ready, but I will equip you. Again, dig into the stories, and we hear Moses, Gideon, Jeremiah, Jonah, Saul, Peter, Timothy, and a whole host of say, I'm not ready. I can't do this. I need more time to get ready. This is a classic line of self-doubt, out of the self-doubt playbook. I love the quote that comes from Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., who lived through the 1800s, and this is what he said: many people die with their music still in them. Too often it is because they are always getting ready to live before they know it, time has run out. Wow. You don't want to be one of those people who dies with the music still in you. Has God given you a dream? Has God given you a vision? Has God given you a mission? Something stirring in your heart, a holy discontent, a way that he wants to use your life and your giftings to change this world, and yet you're always getting ready. Maybe next year I'll be ready. Maybe next year I'll be ready to step into that. And what Wendell Holmes says is that so many people, they end up dying with the music still in them. Don't be that person. And finally, number 7, we hear this out of the people of Scripture. It's all downhill. But God says, you're not done yet. In my study of the people who struggled with self-doubt in the Bible, I found this most curious, that often self-doubt comes after a great victory. After a person has had world-renowned, Bible-renowned, great faith and incredible mountaintop experience, that's when the self-doubt comes. After the parting of the Red Sea, Moses floundered in his faith. After Elijah's fire from heaven victory on Mount Carmel, he ended up in this horrible season of self-doubt. After David defeated Goliath, we see him struggling and overwhelmed and uncertain and full of self-doubt. When Peter, with his renowned walking on water faith triumph moment, he's slapped by a wave of self-doubt. Even the disciples, they have these incredible moments of miracles, and then after that we find them notoriously fumbling their faith. This is such a powerful reminder for every one of us that you cannot coast on your past spiritual victories. What you experienced last month or last year or 10 years ago in terms of your faith victories, they translate into very little for the future. It would be sort of like saying, I want to go to this faraway destination, so I'm going to take a jet plane, but I'm going to turn the engines off halfway and hope to get to the destination. It's not going to happen. God calls us to be ready, to be alert, to be connected to Christ in a way that we are ready for the next mission, ready for the next adventure that God has for us. So if you have heard any of these words play in your own mind, I can't, I'm too weak, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too limited, I'm inferior to others, I'm too afraid, I need proof that God's going to come through, I'm not ready, it's all downhill, my best days are behind me. You need to know that those are just way too obvious lies of the swindler, the con man, the con woman who would love nothing more than to hold you back. If you're anything like me, you've struggled with self-doubt and you hear the choir of voices of self-doubt almost every single day. So the question is, how do we deal with it? What do we do? Is there any silencing of these voices? Well, I think 2 Corinthians chapter 10, we've read this scripture before, but it's just too good to pass up because it's such great advice. Paul writes, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. When those thoughts of self-doubt come in, and they're saying, I know something that you don't. I have authority. I've got the inside track on this one. I've got a truth that you don't know anything about. You're not good enough. We take that thought captive. We stage a rebellion against that thought. We declare civil war on the thought that is voicing this doubt in our own minds. We initiate what we call a Rubicon moment. So what is a Rubicon moment? Well, a Rubicon moment harkens back to a crossing of the Rubicon River by Julius Caesar back in 49 A.D. He made this defiant decision that he, even though it was illegal to cross the river, even though everybody told him he couldn't cross the river, he decided to start a civil war in this Rubicon moment in crossing. And what a Rubicon moment means is a point of no return, where we refuse to be intimidated by the opposition, where we are defiant and we step into the river, no matter the number of voices shouting from the other side of the river that we can't do this. We decide to start doubting doubt and believing God instead. So if self-doubt has been holding you back from a step, from a decision, from a move, from a vision, from a dream, from something that God has called you to, I want to remind you again of what Vincent van Gogh said, and I love this. If you hear a voice within you say you can't paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. Well, that's exactly what Carolyn and I have been doing over this last year. It's been kind of an intense journey, actually, for us. We've maybe hinted at it a little bit, but I would love to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit more about our journey. So I'm going to invite Carolyn and our lead elder, Jay, to come, and we're going to just have a conversation for a few minutes. I want to kind of tell you some stuff that's going on around here. It's been going on in Carolyn and my life, and I figured the best way to do that was to have Elder Jay kind of just ask some questions and walk us through a conversation. So we want to invite you into this conversation.
Thank you, Todd, for the word shared. And before we begin, you just referenced the last period of time and season. And over many years, both of you have been so incredibly transparent in sharing your heartbeat and your struggles, just to bring the word alive and to encourage us as a church. So as your church, we just want to thank you for that. As elders, we've also had the opportunity to journey with you just behind closed doors, where you've sometimes been able to go deeper, and we've had previews to some of those things that have been shared. And about 2 years ago, there was a defining moment that God really spoke to you. If you just want to share more about that.
Yeah. I've hinted at it, and I've kind of alluded to it very quickly in some other services, but I haven't kind of told the larger story. So really quickly, I'm not proud of this, but as you know, I struggled for about 18 months with what I call retirement jealousy. All my peers were retiring, and it went deep, and it really made me very discontent and unhappy. Carolyn and I went away on a prayer retreat at a cabin for a couple of days 2 years ago, looking for some breakthrough and for God to speak to us. Didn't hear anything. We're driving back from Kenora. Carolyn assumes her usual driving position while I'm driving, which is she's sleeping. And so we're driving along, and in just a surprise moment, God opened a door, let me see something for 3 seconds, and closed it. In fact, I was so excited about this, I shook Carolyn, I woke her up, I said, I saw something. And she thought it was a deer or a bear or something. She's looking around, I said, no. And so we spent the rest of the drive, me telling her what I saw. But it was so, it was shocking what I saw. And what I saw was Carolyn and I helping married couples beyond our Riverwood family out there, and our ministry expanding and our influence expanding, and it freaked me out. It felt so strange.
Awesome. And so, what did you do with that? What was your next step? How did you pursue that?
Yeah, so I came back and told the elders, and we started processing. I knew right away that one of the first things I needed to do in order to expand my own capacity was to take the Arrow leadership, and the elders were incredible in coaching me and providing for me to take that 18-month Arrow leadership course. I knew another thing was to begin to speak outside of some different conferences, so I opened myself up to that. And then I've heard for years from people that, and I felt like God was saying this too, I needed to start writing. And so a year ago, January, I put finger to computer and began writing what I thought would be the beginning of a book. Started writing this book, got partway into it, and thought, I can't do this. I certainly can't do this alone. And so I went to Carolyn and said, I need you to join me as my co-author. And Carolyn said,
I said, not on your life am I doing this.
yeah, and you did. And why did you say that?
Well, you know what? I had those voices in my head, that con artist saying, you can't do this. You're not a writer. Who's going to listen to you? There's so many marriage books and content out there. What do you have to say? People are just going to judge you.
Yeah.
Are some of the voices that were in my head.
So that took some negotiation and it's just very, it felt like we were walking into that deeper waters that we'd never been in before, and it's scary, so.
Understandable. So book, that's exciting. So people pay attention to the next couple of questions. Do you have a book now? What's it about? What's the name? Can they buy it? Where are you at on this journey or not?
So I did agree to help along with the writing, and we've entitled it Relationship Rocket Formula, and with the idea that relationships and marriage in particular, it starts off very exciting. It's really thrilling. You're engaged, you're getting married, you're starting life together. But
like the launch of a rocket.
Just like
right?
the launch of a rocket, and once it's in orbit, it begins to lose fuel. Communication falters, and the spark begins to fade. And so we feel like God is calling us to a mission of refueling marriages and reigniting the spark for couples.
Yeah. So went to work, and I did most of the writing. Carolyn was co-writer and editor and helping in all of that. The book is written but not edited. It's not produced yet. It won't come out till later in May. We're going to self-publish. But along with that, we realized that you can't just do one of these things, write a book, and expect it to do anything. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that has to happen. And that's where we really kind of tripped up. We went like, how do we do all this other stuff, right?
And so one night we had all our kids over. We have 3 adult daughters and 3 son-in-laws. And after they left that evening, we started talking about our kids and how each of them have different skills that would really help to be a part of this kind of a mission, and not just a book, but a website, and putting resources out there for couples to engage with.
Yeah, so they're all young married, but they got so excited about it, and they all signed on. Around that circle, we have a social media director, we've got a communications director, an administrator, a website tech director, an editor, and a designer. And so they all said yes. And so they're all volunteering their time. We're volunteering our time, and we're creating this thing that actually is going to be going live today.
So from the vision that God gave you, sounds like you got a small army of a family and the rest that has jumped on. Yeah. And you mentioned a few minutes ago a Rubicon moment. So how is this your Rubicon moment? Is this a river? Where's it at?
Yeah. So today, for the first time ever, we're talking publicly that we've written a book, that we're launching a website, that we're launching social media on 6 platforms. It's called Relationship Rocket, and so this is our no turning back moment of making ourselves going public and just saying this is happening. Yeah.
And one thing that we really want to make clear is that our first priority is Riverwood. Yeah. We are called here. We've given our lives here for 30 years, and that's not stopping. That's our first priority. But we are hoping that with doing this in our extra time, non-Riverwood time, that it will benefit Riverwood, and it will help to make us better leaders, better communicators, and hopefully, give some good resources for people.
And because I was going to ask that question, because as lead pastor and as pastor for care and marriage, you guys are busy people and you invest heavily, and we acknowledge that and we appreciate that. You'll find the time on that side. Todd, where do you see the time? Because you're busy, I know that.
My day usually starts with a 4 or 5 in front of it these days. I'm just woken up and I work for 3 or 4 hours on my own time on this project the last year, and then come to work and do my Riverwood work, and have worked really hard, as you know, to be super accountable and transparent with the elders, and just wanted to do that right, that part of it. None of us knew how to do this, right? And so we're trying to figure that out, but it's with full transparency. And you know what? We're doing it on our own time. We're doing it with our own resources. It's not a fundraiser. It's not a charitable organization. We're just trying to make something happen that will encourage and fuel one couple at a time. And we're pretty pumped on that.
And I think church as well, it's important to know that Todd has been so transparent with their journey in this direction. And as elders, not having navigated this before, we've had to get some outside help and insight into how to keep that relationship working and vibrant between us. I think it's been a very positive year, just as we've set some boundaries, have put some legal frameworks and just things that may not sound relational, but are very healthy to keeping that relationship. And as an elder board, we just so affirm the bigger work that God is calling you to, and it was with full release and is with full release to you to continue to grow in the directions that God has called you, with confidence that he is going to use that expanse and new insights into just building Riverwood as well. So coming full circle though, how has this process in the last 12 months and what we've been talking about today, self-doubt, I'm sure there's been a lot of it over the year, has it silenced it? Has it amplified it? What's that journey been like?
You know, I don't know that you can silence self-doubt. I haven't been able to, and you haven't been able to. I think we can take every thought captive, and we can confront it and start a civil war. We can, you know, if you have a voice that says you can't write, then start writing. You know, I don't know that we can silence it, but we can certainly turn the volume down, and we can start that civil war with the self-doubt. Every single day, Carolyn and I, like we're fundamentally kind of insecure people. This is not, putting ourselves out there in self-promotion is not our MO by any means. And we don't even want to be self-promoted. We want to promote an idea, which is you can have a better marriage. That's what we want to promote. So yeah, we have a choir of self-doubt singing to us every single day, and we just have to defy it and go against it and say, you know what, we're not going to listen to you, and we're going to step ahead anyway. And so maybe that's the encouragement or the lesson out of that, right, is do it anyway.
As a church, we'll be praying for you guys on the journey, and thank you again just for letting us know where you're at. And in the months ahead, we look forward to the success that God would bring you on that. And thanks for sharing today. Blessings. Appreciate it.
Thanks. So we felt it was really important that we stay transparent with you. Some of you will have already seen a little teaser on social media, and you might have wondered what in the world is going on. So now I hope you know the accountability and transparency with our elders has been super important to us. But we want to share this mostly to just say to you, what is the dream that God has in you that maybe you've set aside or you have allowed the choir to drown out? What is the calling? What is the mission? Because here's the deal. If you are still alive and your heart is still beating and you are still walking on this earth, God is not done with you yet. He has a mission for you. He has a purpose for you, something for his kingdom, something for this world. What is it? And have you shrunk back from it because of self-doubt, or are you stepping into it? My encouragement to you today is step into that Rubicon moment. Start a civil war with your doubts. Begin doubting your doubts and begin just simply doing what God is calling you to do. Let's declare who we are in Christ. Let's worship together.